Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Lockett, and this is Lasting Conversations. We have the extraordinary, the phenomenal, and the very colorful Jill Karlin Butler with us in the studio today. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Heather.
I'm so thrilled. We have so much jam-packed today that we're doing 2 segments. So this is going to be episode number 56, and then we're going to have a pause, which will then roll into episode number 57 that will drop another week. So Jill, welcome, welcome, welcome. Jill is a visionary. She's an artist. She's a yogi. She is a human who loves sustainability. You are a team human. You're here to help the planet, help our homes, help each other. You spread your joy, you spread your color, you spread your love. And I'm just so thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So one of the first things that we're going to be tapping into, you have your mom who lived to just about 105, who was a ball of wax, and you grew up in the Boston area. So we'll get into your muse and your history of getting into art, which you were just showing me some of her own artwork. So maybe it was part of your life. Mm-hmm. And what your career has been, what your passions have been. And then you have your amazing husband, Lee Porter Butler, that we'll focus on the next show. But I know it all swims together.
Okay.
And you have, we bring up swimming because your website is called The Dolphin Dream. So we're really, really rolling. So Jill, take us to, what is it about color? What is it about your art? What is your vision? And where did all of this come from?
Where it came from. Well, I'm definitely attracted to the blending, the harmonizing of colors. And so I feel that that's what we do every time we create a piece of beautiful artwork, is that we create a harmonious environment. And other artists don't necessarily use that as their sort of standard, but for me it is. So, yes, but that also came with training as well, where you learn about light and dark, and you learn about negative and positive, and you learn about how to make colors harmonious and how to blend colors and all of that stuff. So that then becomes natural.
You know, that was interesting. I hadn't really considered this when you're saying so every artist has their own way, whether it's music or visual. The visual is mostly your medium. And so when you're just saying that some artists don't have that same come from in terms of making the harmony of it all.
True.
Every piece of art, every piece of creativity, we want to get something out of us and out into the world and just sort of bring that forth. So that was kind of interesting that you're finding that some artists, they do that, and however that lands or sticks, maybe somebody likes it or they don't. But what you're saying is you're very intentional and very conscious about your art.
Truly, yes. I mean, there are obviously artists that do things to do just the opposite, to make people feel uncomfortable, to make people feel questioning, to do other things.
And very provocative, and that's cool too.
And it just is not, it doesn't attract me. That's not what my modus operandi is. I'm about creating harmony, beauty. I use the words from John Keats: beauty is truth, truth is beauty. That's all ye on earth need to know, and all you need to know forevermore. Or I have the quote wrong, but it's close.
But it works.
Something like that. And so truth is beauty. Beauty is truth. So I wrote a series of books in 1997 called The Little Seven Books, and the pinnacle book is Beauty and Truth. And I'll bring that another time. But they're little books that you can read in 1 minute each. Each book is 1 minute, and they correspond to your chakras. And so, like I say, the pinnacle is beauty and truth. Beauty, truth, and goodness. So those are the highest qualities that we want to attain and that we aspire for.
Just getting all the tingles. So maybe this goes into your body, which is that you're a yogi. And if I read your little bio mention on your website, that you were doing this. Somehow you were called to yoga even as a young child.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit more about that part.
So my older sister is 10 years older than I am, and she had been in a skiing accident when she was 17, and she came home with a book by a yogi, and I remember it clearly. And she told me what happened. She said, you just took the book and you started copying the poses. And from there, I was 7 years old. And from there, I started yoga lessons. This is in the 1960s. There were very few people doing yoga. Yeah. And I went to a progressive school, and the phys ed teachers asked me to start teaching yoga. So I started teaching yoga when I was a young teenager, and I've been teaching yoga my whole life.
This is so cool. So now let's go ahead and segue right into, you were brought up in Massachusetts. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
near you.
Well, see, we never know who is about to cross our paths or where our lives have taken us.
Or maybe we've crossed paths before.
Exactly. So just out of curiosity, so you grew up in the Newton area of Massachusetts. What was the school? Was it a Waldorf school or a Montessori school?
Oh, no. Newton South High School, the public school, was featured on the cover of the New York Times magazine, or our middle school was, for how progressive we were. So I was in the regular public school.
No kidding.
Yes.
That's cool.
But I believe Lexington and Concord had also progressive schools. I can't remember.
Well, see, I came in the 70s. So I started kindergarten in whatever that was, 1969, 70. And then, so it was a bit of different. So they were all progressive.
Right.
In their own way.
Right.
We can tap into that a little bit later. Yeah.
Right.
So they were all, well, yeah. If you go to Alcott School in Concord, Massachusetts, there was one of the traditional classrooms, and then it was very progressive. So this was very, very cool stuff. A very interesting time.
Well, I think that the Boston area was kind of big in education in the suburbs in Boston.
It's one of the homes of public school education.
And actually, speaking of which, my mother, whom we will speak about, graduated, and she was the oldest, I discovered in October a year ago, just before she passed, the oldest living alumni of Girls Latin School. And Girls Latin School was the first girls' high school in the world. And my mother was the oldest alumni of that school. I happened in on one of their alumni association meetings across the street at the Peabody Estate from where my mom was in rehab where she lived, and happened into this circumstance where I discovered this.
You know, let's go into Eleanor. That's your mom's.
Lenore.
Sorry about that, Lenore. Because she was a hot ticket.
Yeah.
And she almost made to 105. What did you say? It's 104 point?
I say 104.7.
104.7. That's like a nice little radio station. So we're going to tune into Lenore.
Right.
So tell us about your mom, because I have been intrigued ever since you and I met years ago. You were telling her tale through you. And so again, with the muse and the music and the art and the vision, tell us more about your mom. You showed us a picture of her driving a Maserati at 100 and something. She just had this vivaciousness to life, and you have a vivaciousness to life. And part of this show is about how age has zero number. It just doesn't. And because we can live and enjoy and be free. Yeah.
Well, I'll pay tribute to her. At 100, I brought her to the casino. And my mother would never tell people her age. She would always say, age is just a number. And so we were at my sister's daughter's graduation in Springfield, Massachusetts, where my mother was pinning her for her nursing school degree. And my sister and her family were going out to get ready for the party that was ensuing at their house later. And she was like, you go home and rest with Mom. I said, oh, no, we're going to the casino. And so at the casino, I said, Mom, you have to just tell people that you're 100 so that, you get perks and stuff. And while we were there,
you get free tokens at least.
Exactly. So while we were there, we were racking up the tokens. We were racking up the free drinks, the free cocktails, the free meals, and we got a 3-day stay, which we didn't take, but we got a lot of stuff from that.
That's so funny.
But yeah, no, she was very determined, extremely determined person, and very definite about things that she did, and she was an artist.
Okay. And was that her career or calling or both?
Well, in that era, that wouldn't, it was.
That's why I brought it up, right?
It wasn't necessarily, it could have been a career option. Right. I feel like my mother would have flourished even more had she been able to make money at some of the things that she did, so that it might have given her a little more sense of self-worth in that era. Not that she was really missing that, but there was a time when that was an argument, because she had done the books at my dad's office. My dad was a doctor in Boston, very prominent. And so Mom had done the books, and the accountant wouldn't let her get paid for it.
Oh my goodness.
And that really bothered her. And I didn't blame her.
Of course.
And she didn't get her own Social Security check, because she was the wife of a doctor. And she had to, take his, or however that goes in Social Security. But I think that it was an era thing. There was a lot of chauvinism in that era. And so that was something. And, but she was an artist, and she did a massive amounts of amazing work. Like the tattoo here is a design that I just found when I was going through her things. She did all these tray paintings in the 1930s at Amy Sacker School of Design in Boston, which closed in like 1937 or something. And so I've got a series of these beautiful design that I'm going to tattoo all over myself. I'm going to have my mom all over me.
Oh my gosh, those are so beautiful.
Yeah.
So she got to play, but how many siblings? Because then she was raising a family as well, and the wife of a prominent doctor, and did all of those, things that you do in that era.
In that era, she was very involved with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts.
Okay.
We did classes there every Saturday. She did her classes there all the time. And she had season tickets to the Boston Symphony that my brother still has. She had season tickets to the opera, to the ballet. So she was very culturally minded.
Nice.
And she instilled all of that. I hated it when I was a kid, but it just, like the other kids would get to do other things, and I had to go to opera.
What did you want to do?
Not that. So, but it does give you a background for sure.
Sure. Well, so then let's go ahead. And was there anything more about Lenore that you want to share before we'll segue into your art and how it all flows together?
Not necessarily right now.
She loved her cocktail. She loved adventure.
Oh, yeah. She lived through me and my adventures. She loved wherever I was traveling. She was very happy about my travels.
Fun.
And she would travel as much as she could when she was, active. And at age 97, we went to England, and my niece was living in Cambridge. And true to my mother's style and her enjoyment of cocktails, I was doing a street painting festival in Southend-on-Sea. I was the chairperson of the Sister City Board for the city of Lake Worth. And our sister city is Southend-on-Sea, which is this sort of carny town, or people would think of it as that. But it has the longest pleasure pier, as did Lake Worth at one point.
Oh, right.
In England. And ours was, I think, in America at one point. The pier was very long. And so it brought some synergy there. And we do a street painting festival in Lake Worth. And so they were doing one in Southend, and I was participating in that. My mom was helping out in the design, but it was raining. And so which
is never great for a street painting festival.
Never good for a street painting, but England, it's to be anticipated.
Yeah.
And so we went inside of a pub. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's ordering tea, and they come to my mom and they go, "What would you like?" And my mother goes, "I'd like a beer, please." And everybody cracked up. They thought it was so cute. And along that line, and my mother was not a drinker. It's just that she had her standard cocktail in the evening, and maybe it extended to 2 or more, but it was part of the culture
exactly
of that era that you had a cocktail at 5 o'clock
on the dot. It
was just part of the culture. I remember my grandmother and my mother always having a cocktail, and my mother kept decanted in the refrigerator her martinis and Manhattans, and so whoever happened to come over, there was one ready-made, in those beautiful crystal bottles, those lovely crystal bottles with the nice tops.
The tops, exactly.
And the maraschino cherries that we used to get to eat from the Manhattan cocktails, they start us young. But we were in Cambridge, and every day we would, do sightseeing. We had a cousin there as well, and we were out doing Cambridge things in Cambridge. And my niece lived along the Cam River, a little bit outside of the downtown of Cambridge. So we would have to walk. It was quite a bit of a walk. My mother never fazed her, walking what it was, a half a mile or whatever it was. And we walk along the Cam, and along the Cam are all these houseboats, and they're all along the Cam River. And every day Mother would say, I would just love to go on one of those houseboats. And one day we're walking past this guy, and he is having his cocktail, and he invites us on to have a cocktail with him. And so getting on board a houseboat on the Cam River is not an easy feat, because there's a wall, and that's a 90-degree angle. So the ladder is not at a slant.
So they don't have dock or ramps.
No. The ladder is at a 90-degree angle. My mother was determined. At 97 years old, she, with the help of this man and us, went down this 90-degree angle ladder to have a cocktail on board a houseboat, as she had desired. And we all had cocktails aboard this guy's houseboat, and we had a lovely time. But the man said that there were people half her age that wouldn't go down the ladder, and come on board the boat. So it was, that was quite typical.
And did she love that there's one more off her bucket list? She got to be on a houseboat.
Yeah. Well, it was just walking by every day. They were sort of charming. And they're very narrow. They're only about...
that's right. They're little. They're smaller.
They're 6 foot wide at maximum or something. So they're very long and narrow.
Oh, that's so fun.
But yeah, she had quite a great spirit. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's to Lenore. And when you were telling that story, we'll drink our electrolyte water to
electrolyte water.
Cheers to that.
She would like that too.
She would like that. But you were reminding me of my own grandparents, and before we got going here on the show, that my grandmother would have turned, I believe, 110. She would have had her 110th. And so your mom and my grandmother were within the same era. And so the vision of, we would always have tea time. And so tea was at 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then somehow or another, it would roll into segue right into cocktail hour. But what was hilarious as you were telling your story was, and I could see my grandfather especially, they would have to look at their watch.
Right.
And they'd say, oh, I've missed it. As if they missed that cue that you were talking about it at 5 o'clock. That's cocktail hour. Right. So if it was already 6, we better get on it. Who wants a drink? Yeah. Hopefully that's at least not in my world, but that was how they were brought up.
Yes.
You had your meals and then your drink, and now it's cocktail hour.
Well, my dad didn't get home. My dad did not drink at all. And so, and he was a doctor, and he didn't necessarily, he had to do rounds and had to go see his patients. In those days, you saw people. He did house calls. He did. In those days, he did house calls at 2 a.m. It didn't matter. You did house calls. And so he had to go visit all his patients, and he oftentimes wouldn't get home till later.
Right.
However, Mother always had the cocktail, and my grandmother, when she was there, always had the cocktail. And they had a variety of people that would stop in, and one of whom was the 5th violinist from Boston Symphony, who we called Uncle Leo. And he would come and have his vodka with my mom and my grandma. And, that would be a standard. He'd just pop in on his way home from practice. And,
nice.
And it was quite regular.
Nice. When did your dad pass away?
3 months after my husband, 18 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. Well, and we're definitely talking about your husband, and we'll segue all of that into that next show and the Ekotecture and your love and your muse and the reason why you're about to do a whole, what did you say, screenplay or a show? Okay. So this is really, really deep. That's very cool. But what that meant was, so your mom hadn't been widowed. At what point was she widowed then?
She was 88. My dad was 89.
They had a long marriage.
70 years together.
Oh my
They
gosh.
were, I think, together 60. They were married. They went steady for 5 years straight before they married. So I think that they were 70 years together. I think their married years were 65 or 66. I'm not quite sure. I didn't really calculate that. Somebody in my family surely knows it, and we can easily find it out. I think it was they married, I think, before World War II. But Dad participated in World War II. He was a doctor, and I guess they called it a medic.
Yeah.
And he was trained to do what was called surgery in flight surgery, because that was the Army Air Force in World War II.
Oh.
But he ended up in the Battle of the Bulge. He ended up in Patton's army. And Dad and Mom corresponded with one another every single day of his 18-month deployment. And we have every one of those letters along with photographs, because my dad had a Leica camera, and he would label. Which are
beautiful. The Leica lenses. Yeah.
And he would label those photos and send them back to Mom. And there's only one that I remember that stand out, that is of Eagle's Nest, Hitler's hideaway. And it's a photograph. It's about 1 inch by 2 inches, the photos that we have. They're in a book. Mom put them very carefully, meticulously in a book. And it's of the GIs standing in silhouette against the gigantic big window and looking out onto the mountains beyond. And it's stunning. It's like a stellar photograph,
wow,
of that era. But yeah, so that was a different era.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he came back from World War II, and America was a very different place than it is today.
It is. So we'll still go to the art part.
Yeah.
Again, we can go on to so many amazing tangents that this is very, very rich and lovely, because that was very powerful, that moment right there. So let's talk about your power and your gifts, which is going from the black and whites of an old camera into the color. And what you're even wearing is art. And so let's go. Let's talk about Jill Karlin, artist. And you have some beautiful props here to show what it is that you're doing and bringing forward and what's available for people to enjoy.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'll start with the watercolors, because people love those. I should do like this.
You can do whatever you wish. So just as for instance, this beautiful watercolor has now also then segued
into the dress.
But you've done paintings and you've shown in all kinds of different areas, and you've created books and things like that as well.
Yes. So the watercolors come from an earlier era, and I was commissioned by a lady that was doing the presidential suites of major hotels, the Ritz in Atlanta, the Anatole in Dallas, and she commissioned me to do these tall watercolors of orchids. So I ended up painting in the greenhouse of Walter Honeywell, who was the president of Horticulture magazine, in these kind of paintings, these taller ones here. I don't know if you can see them.
They're beautiful.
But those
orchids.
And those were quite tall.
Are those daffodils or just variations of the orchids?
They're all orchids. And so from there, I sort of put together in, like I say, harmonious and balancing the colorways, these kind of paintings. And these are prints of the paintings. And that was how I got started doing all these watercolors. And from there, I segued into doing handmade paper. And handmade paper I did in a mill in Boston, Massachusetts, that was called the Rug Road Paper Mill. And Bernie and Joe worked with artists to create these. These are, again, pictures of the handmade paper, but they're very textural. When you create handmade paper, it's pulp that is being mushed together. So I have a palette that I pick out before I start the work. And from the palette, I take this goop, which is the handmade paper, and I create a painting. So there's no paint on these paintings. These pictures of this handmade paper, I don't know if they're still handmade paper now. These are just a few of them. But on the handmade paper paintings, there's no paint in the painting.
No kidding, even though it looks like it's been painted.
It's all in the goop, so it's sculptural. So the goop, which is the pulp that has been ground down, is I put together and I create the image with the pulp. So it's kind of like...
Did each pulp have its own coloration in it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, each of them is colored, and they're big, huge, like garbage tins worth of pulp, because these are quite large. These are,
wow,
wall size, so to speak. And so that was another phase. I go through phases.
Well, that's very tactile and messy, and you're just in it, especially on that scale. My goodness.
Yes. Well, they're done in a vat.
Okay.
So you create them all in this big vat, and then you drain out all the water.
Wow.
And so, and then the other thing that I do a lot of is that one of the things that I do and have been doing since the 70s are these portraits of homes. And how I do the portraits is that that was the first one I did in Martha's Vineyard, and I can't show it very well,
okay.
But I do the painting of the house centrally, and then in the border, I do a whole story about the people in their lives. So they become very personal. And then I started doing them for resorts and hotels. And so I had a whole business when I opened my gallery in Palm Beach of doing these portraits. And I had a souvenir business. I had a manufacturing business where I manufactured souvenirs of all of these things for the breakers and I don't know what is showing here.
Everything is showing. That's okay. This is, I know for those just listening, Jill is showing us one of her books printed of all these things, and this is going to go up on YouTube. So we're filming as well. And tell us a little about John Lennon's boat.
Yes.
That's
so
really cute. And there's the breakers.
Yeah. So I was hired by the people that owned the boat to do a painting commemorating the day that he sailed with them. And they had me do a whole story about that along the border of that painting. And that one just auctioned at a charity event in Palm Beach, literally at Mar-a-Lago, I would say the week before COVID hit. But I've done them of, the Flagler Museum, the Palm Beach Civic Association. I can't remember various people's businesses and various things in Palm Beach. So so there's a variety of paintings of. I don't know how I'm doing this, but
that's
anyway.
Okay. So what I was wondering is, and we'll get to your logo in a second here, because you enjoy travel, but you are here. I'm a New England transplant, so you were born and raised in Massachusetts. Let's talk about how you landed here in Florida, and this is where the color and the brightness, and you're out on the beach and you're just part of nature here in Florida. How did that arrive?
I was participating in an orchid show in Miami, and it was the Southeast Florida Eastern Orchid Congress or something. And I had my art there. And I sold everything. But not only did I sell everything, I got these commissions, and I'd never received this kind of work. So I was driving home when I got back from Florida with my mom in the car. We were driving home from the airport, and I was just going through the stack of checks. I'd never had this in my life.
Fantastic. So the money was just coming to you because they enjoyed
I was
calling.
Getting commissions down there. And so I was at a yoga class with a friend of mine, Allison Ryder, and I said, and it was winter and I was freezing cold, and I suffer from something called Raynaud's phenomena where my fingertips blanch out. And I said, I think I should move to Florida. I'd never been there before, but I walked off the plane and I thought, when I came there, I just thought, oh my God, this warm, balmy breeze on my air on my body, it just feels amazing. And it's so lovely. And I used to think that Florida is where old people went to die.
Didn't we all?
And I didn't.
I think it was marketed as that for a while, but
and I thought, I kind of know why. So Allison said, well, I know some people in Florida. And she introduced me to Susie Cochran and Mimi Wellfeld. And I have a painting here of something in Mimi's garden somewhere. But so Mimi said, well, there's an apartment available in the building where my store is. And sure enough, I ended up renting that apartment, and the rest is history.
And so how long ago was that?
This 1985, I think.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
So it was that's Mimi's garden.
That was Mimi's garden. Oh, I love it. So
that one is something in Palm Beach. I'm sorry, the microphone is in the way here.
Nice. So your career as an artist has been flourishing, and it's your joy and your passion.
Yes.
And what we're going to do is before we're going to make our segue for the next show, because this gets into a whole other realm of what your art and passion is about in the Ekotecture. Well, but right now, so show us your little bag and again with the clothing, because this is how we can round out this particular piece.
Well, I think there's something else, but
okay.
I'll show you. Yes, good. I'll show you. Anyway, these are some of the designs.
Yes.
And this will be available in January.
January.
The beginning of the year.
Well, because your dress is so beautiful. And I would actually make a call to action to any artist or anybody or parents of kiddos. If they've made something, you can turn them into something else so that they don't sit necessarily on your fridge or in a drawer, but they're meant to be worn or shown off. So these dresses, and they're made from
100% recycled water bottles.
100% recycled water bottles.
Yes, all of this stuff is.
Oh my gosh.
But I just was going to show you, because I sort of feel rushed now, but these are hand-painted tile murals that are done from that I do myself. I hand-paint tile murals. And this is 3 walls in my...
Your talent is vast.
Okay, there we go.
It's so gorgeous.
But you were talking about travel. So
yes.
Wherever I go, I paint. So here are some pictures from Italy.
Do you take your watercolors with you?
Watercolors, yes.
Perfect.
But the segue to the next section is about India, because I was staying in India, and I was painting. And I went there ostensibly for my yoga in 1988. And B.K.S. Iyengar was my teacher. And I planned this trip, but I thought, if I'm going halfway around the world, plan a trip for 6 months. And my friend, Gavin Douglas, had been with the Raj. He was a British Sandhurst graduate, Royal Air Force.
Whole thing.
Just out of a storybook, taught the Aga Khan how to fly a plane. And he was working for Thomas Cook, which was a big travel agency in the days.
Right.
And so he said, Jill, I'll plan your trip for you. So we would go to the Society for the Four Arts in the library, and he would say, and so we planned out my trip. And it started with a few months in Nepal. I was going to climb one of the big mountains, one of the 20,000-foot peaks, not Everest, but a smaller one, maybe in the Annapurna circuit. I can't remember exactly now. And so I planned this whole trip like this, and I brought my paints and everything. And I got to Nepal, and I was so inspired by the colors that I just started painting. And so I was painting in Nepal and decided to cancel my trek and just paint. So this English photographer and I we would wake up at 4 a.m. and we would stay in these like 24 rupee, $1 a night places. They were a bunch of Australians with us traveling. And we wake up every morning at 4 and we'd get on a city bus or on a local Nepalese bus. And we would go to one or another different towns that actually right now were devastated by the most recent earthquakes there.
I heard about that this weekend.
And well, the ones before the earlier earthquakes.
Okay.
But these incredibly beautiful towns, Bhaktapur, Kirtapur, and I would paint. And then we would meet about 4 hours later after he did photographs and I did paintings.
And these are so stunning because they almost have it. Well, they have a different energy, a different flair to them in their simplicity. They're very gorgeous and layered and textured, but they're not, you were just showing us and we were talking about your florals and your gardens and the flow of it all. These have capture the essence. They're very simple lines, more simple lines than some of the other pieces. So this is just beautiful that you have.
So I was in India and through Gavin, I was introduced to somebody named Vicky Oberoi. Vicky Oberoi owns the largest, most luxurious hotel chain in the East. It's called the Oberoi Hotels. And so when Vicky and his girlfriend Mira met me, they were like, we're taking you under our wings. We're going to take you everywhere. So I went with them to Pushkar, which is a town which is probably this weekend. It's in Rajasthan, and it has something called the Camel Fair. And everybody brings their camels to Pushkar to sell. So there are 10,000 camels at the Pushkar Camel Fair. And every morning I would open up my tent and I would look out my tent, and there would be, I used to go, I'm in the Bible. I'm living in the Bible. Here's a picture of the cattle fair, of the camel fair.
Because you were out in the countryside, in the desert.
Yes, in the desert.
Oh, beautiful.
And with everybody with their turbans and their camels. Like there were 10,000 camels there. And so these are oil paintings. Some of the others the oils I did when I got back to the States. So I don't know how to show this.
That's beautiful.
But those are the simple lines that you were talking about. And so I subsequently met Vicky and Mira in London, and they invited me back to India to do an exhibition of my paintings at the Oberoi, and it was very well received. And I became friends with all the Maharajas. It was really fun. And I got to go to all the palaces and live in all these palaces.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was amazing. But I did get a calling to come back to America. I actually had been to India 3 times. The first time was that trip in 1988. And then I was called to India from a bookstore in Brookline, Massachusetts, where I saw a picture of Ramana Maharshi, who's the great saint who lived in Tiruvannamalai, in the town where Gavin's second wife lived. And so I went and stayed with Katya in Tiruvannamalai, and I got sick. And typical, I've been sick more than once in India, but I got the thing you get evidently from drinking orange juice on a train because they don't clean the glass out. The orange juice was...
The orange juice is okay, but the glassware. Ooh,
evidently. And so I was super sick. And Chris Quilke, my friend who worked for Katya, set up a cot for me on the second story of the house in Katya's house in Tiruvannamalai, so that I could just lay there and look at Arunachala, which is the holy mountain. And what are you supposed to do in Tiruvannamalai? You're supposed to be absolutely still and look at the mountain. Wow. So I got to do that for 6 weeks, just because I wasn't well. But
did you find the majesty in that? And at the time you weren't feeling well, but did you get kind of the God wink, so to speak, of be still and know?
I mean, that was what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
and I was, like I say, I wasn't feeling terribly well and I
Right.
still wasn't feeling well when I got back to the States 6
Right.
weeks later, or
Yeah.
however long later it was. So, yeah, but you can't help but get something. India is such a magical place that if you wanted to spend another couple hours, I could tell you stories that are mind-blowingly amazing about India. Katya's, even just getting to these places and knowing these amazing people, to be able to stay with Katya Douglas, whose father was Arthur, whose brother was Arthur Osborne, whose father was Arthur Osborne, whose brother was Adam Osborne. And Katya spoke fluent Tamil. For an English-speaking person, that is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But she grew up there because her father, who was in Oxford or Cambridge professor of philosophy, had been incarcerated in World War II by the Japanese, and in Burma, I think. And he was a philosopher who had found Ramana Maharshi, the great saint, and wanted to live next to him. And so he built his house there, and he lived there with Katya's mother, who was Ludmilla, who was one of his Polish students from Oxford or Cambridge, wherever he was. So Katya was born there. And so I got to be in that environment, in a very holy place. It's probably, Arunachala is called the mountain of light, Shiva as light. So it's the representation that many Hindus are drawn to be in that place for that reason, to be in the presence of the mountain of Arunachala, Shiva as light.
I love it.
And so I had that incredible opportunity to be there for all that time, not moving.
Well, that is absolutely spectacular. And what we're going to do is, in the show, we call it the ... and saving for the next piece, which gets into the housing and the houses of the holy and the houses of the vision. Mm-hmm. And you've got your dolphin dreams. And so we're going to continue the conversation for our next episode. And Jill, this round one has been spectacular already.
So thank you so much. I'm humbled. I think it's very kind, very nice. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you once again. And everybody, thank you for listening. Please be sure to like, follow, and share and review this show. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, send emails to podcasts@lastingconversations.com and find us on Facebook and now Instagram at Lasting Conversations. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.